Director, Product Management, Spatial Computing, Ultraleap. Matt joined Ultraleap in 2020 and is the Director of Spatial Computing. In this role, he is instrumental in driving Ultraleap's product offerings, roadmaps, and partnerships in virtual reality, augmented reality, and spatial computing overall. Matt has almost 20 years of experience in the consumer electronics industry, has worked in the XR ecosystem at both TOEI and immersion in business development roles. Prior to that, Matt spent 10 years at Dolby Laboratories, Inc. in its game division. He led Dolby's gaming efforts as marketing director and held roles including product manager and developer support engineer. Matt holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Let's welcome Matt.
Awesome. Thank you. That was quite the introduction. I was going to give a little bit of background on myself, but I think that went into it. I guess I came from our marketing folks. So I work for Ultraleap. Many of you may have heard of us, especially if you know our previous companies that kind of came together for who we are now. Many of you probably have experienced Leap Motion hand tracking technology if you've been here at AWE for any period of time, and also Ultra Haptics, which is mid-air haptic technology that uses ultrasound to create haptic sensations in the middle of the air. So that's who we are. I'm here to talk about hand tracking and why that's going to be a big thing for XR, hopefully the equivalent to what the touchscreen was to mobile. And I'll get into what I mean by that. As I talked a bit about my background, or nice introduction, I just say that I'm a lifelong technologist. My dad was a lifelong engineer for IBM. I started playing video games at a young age on the Atari 2600 with him, playing Miss Pac-Man. I've worked at Dolby, Tobii, and Immersion. So I've done sound, eyes, touch. I've done a lot of the senses. So I have a broad technology background, and I'm a lot of experience in understanding how to bring ingredient technologies to market and the effect that they can have on big consumer markets. So hopefully I can share kind of some optimistic views for VR and AR. I think everyone here is really excited that this is the year. I've been waiting a long time for this to be the year of VR and AR or XR. But really, I think everyone feels it at this point in time, right? One of the biggest companies in the world just changed their name to appeal to the metaverse. So the timing's right. So let's get into this. So as far as an agenda goes, going to talk to you, right there, what the touchscreen was to mobile. So spend some time just explaining what that actually meant, what I mean by that. Try to explain to you why hand tracking will have the same effect, hopefully on XR, AR, and VR. Talk about some lessons learned from that previous paradigm shift when we went from desktop computing to mobile devices. And then also some tips, lessons learned. Again, we've been at this almost 10 years now, if you go back to the start of Leap Motion. So some lessons learned is those of you that are developing really cool applications in AR or VR, as you adapt those applications to hand tracking, or if you're starting new applications, what can we share from the lessons learned on that point? So what was the touchscreen to mobile computing? New interactions, pinch to zoom, pull to refresh, swipe for love for some people. Maybe you're successful in that whole thing. It made games and photography accessible to everyone, right? It put like an incredibly high quality camera in our pocket. It made games accessible to far more people than had game consoles. The benefit to that is that it created multi-billion-dollar businesses. Like some of the biggest companies in the world today got their start in mobile. You can think of Tencent and Supercell, who rapidly grew to the size that they dwarfed some of the titans of the game industry and bigger than EA and Take-Two and these guys, right? And the revenues were off the charts. So really what we see is that, the touchscreen expanded the market dramatically, and not only for the device side, but the content side. And so we think that hand tracking can have that same effect. So why do we think it's going to expand the market dramatically? First of all, it'll make it accessible to the masses. We've seen what putting a touchscreen in front of someone can do. It's obvious. We grew up with our hands reaching out, touching things. You see things like little kids being able to use touchscreens. My mom being able to participate, use her phone, take a picture, share it, put a funny little meme text on it. Really, prior to that, we were looking at things like keyboards, smartphones were really power user devices. Really, it just expanded the market, right? And on top of that, if we look at how hand tracking can play a part in making it more accessible, we can also look at the idea of bringing the cost down, right? So VR systems only recently brought the cost down to where they're affordable for everyone. If you can remove controllers from the equation, that reduces the BOM cost for an OEM dramatically, right? So you can start buying these devices, and in some ways you can shift controllers from a cost center to a profit center, right? And we see that with the game consoles, when they started shipping just one controller, and then you had to buy the extra one, right? And then you're getting some margin back. So really, we think that it's going to have an effect on everybody, but also it's going to be good for business, right? And it's going to be good for business and bring down the costs. So that's kind of making it more accessible. Additionally, I'll talk about how we think that hand tracking is going to help achieve the promise of presence. This is a big thing in the world of VR, especially. It's kind of the holy grail for VR, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that later and talk about why we think hand tracking can help that out. So, as I said, hand tracking removes the barrier to entry. I'm going to do a quick pop quiz for the audience, just to hopefully get you guys, I know everyone's thinking beer o'clock, let's get going. But which hand or which controller is the X button on the Oculus controller? Anyone who thinks it's on the left hand, raise your hand. Anyone who thinks it's on the right hand, raise your hand. All right, we'll get back to that in a second. So I'd say, first of all, VR controllers can intimidate a lot of people, right? You're in a demo, you're already like blocked off from the outside world if you're in VR, and someone's like, hey, press that Y button or press that X button. Well, what? You can't even look at it anymore. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you figure it out? It's that one on the west side of the left hand. It becomes a challenging thing even to give demos. And so really we want to give that power back to people to take that away, right? And there's a study that the AARP actually did in 2019 where it talked about how 76% of Americans over the age of 50 were playing games frequently. Again, I think it's measured on like a weekly basis or multiple times a week. 76%. If you told me when I was playing the PlayStation 2 that 76% of people over 50 were going to be playing games daily, I would have told you were crazy. Why is that? Because the touchscreen made it accessible. People designed games for them. It just, again, it made all the barriers, we remove those, and we really see that like if you can get everyone in, then it becomes something, then we get the critical mass, you get more content, the businesses can now sell to people. Again, it's just great for everybody. By the way, it's the left hand. It's the left controller. The X is on the left-hand side. It's not the right. So I think most people were, not to say that we had most people were wrong. But again, it's just natural because if, on any traditional controller, again, they're in different positions on the Nintendo, on the Xbox, on the PlayStation, but they're all on the right, right? So the natural thing is to think that all those buttons are on the right when it's on the left. So we think we're going to do a lot here as far as like removing those barriers to entry. I want to talk about just a few case studies that we've seen. Again, we've been at this for a while. We've been working with big companies. Companies like Lufthansa. So Lufthansa does flight attendant training. And traditionally, they do this training in an actual mock airplane. You want to bring people in. They do things like pre-flight checks, what to do, right? And you're going through, and you have to make sure that all the bins are closed, make sure the tray tables are up. But also they do things like, what do you do if someone gets up and gets crazy and maybe pulls out a weapon? How do you respond? What are you supposed to do? Well, if you're trying to teach people how to react in those situations, and they're thinking about, man, what's this button I need to press? They're not going to get it. The cognitive load is too great, right? And you're going to not get the training home. So if you can enable them to just go, okay, I got it, like reach up, touch the overhead bins. Oh, there's stuff's happening. I'm going to go back and push the alarm button. Those kind of things. Like it enables everybody to participate, right? Flight attendants, I like using that because you have a wide variety of demographic there, from young people to veterans of the industry. And we've already seen plenty of really good data and really good stuff here in this space. There's a lot of interest in the medical space around, specifically in AR, but also VR. This is another training simulation. So we work with a company called Tetra Signum, based out of Korea, and they do CPR training amongst other training stuff. And this is one where really what we see is the benefit is in muscle memory. right? So I mentioned a little bit, you reach up, close the bins. In this situation, when you're giving CPR, it's very important that your hands are in a very specific spot with a certain orientation. And this is something if you have a controller and you're trying to like, okay, I'm gonna get to, they have these mannequins and you get down, you're like, it doesn't work. It's your hand's in this position holding a controller. And so, it's not gonna work. And again, just like in the Lufthansa where instead of having you come to a plane, you can put VR out in the field. It makes it more accessible, you reduce travel costs. There's a lot of benefits in both these spaces, but also it comes down in some cases to muscle memory. There's also the operational benefits of VR, and I think we've all kind of seen some of that, or an AR, people out in the field being able to learn how to do something like, hey, your hand's not doing that right, you need to do it this way. So we can extrapolate that out, right? And so a lot of good stuff, again, really trying to make it accessible to everyone and focus on the key things like building muscle memory. Again, lots of benefits for hand tracking in that space. Next up, I'm just going to talk about games. Again, this is the market for VR right now is consumer games in many ways. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in the training, but also consumer games. And what we've seen is we've had a lot of success in the location-based entertainment space, family entertainment centers, VR arcades, whatever name you have for them. There's a lot of really good stuff happening there. And what we see, I love this quote, by the way, that's why I chose this one. We do a lot of good stuff with folks in this space, but I just love this quote. For this type of experience, a handheld controller would make no sense. Either you have hand tracking or you just don't have hands at all. You're riding a motorcycle in this one, you reach out, and it's interesting, we do a lot of work with people, you're holding guns and, or there's various things like escape rooms, stuff like that. The very first thing almost everyone does, and again, these are experiences targeted at a wide demographic. Again, you have 12-year-old birthday parties bringing their parents along. You have like the college kids getting out there and trying the new stuff. Everyone waves. They turn to the person next to them and they want to wave, right? There's a very social aspect to it. You really, and if you don't have that, it's like, it's weird. It's like, oh, okay, like what's going on? But when you see someone wave at you, it breaks things down, right? It makes it more comfortable for you to participate in the experience. Again, there's a lot of human side to this. But really, it's really interesting that in almost all these experiences when we talk, the very first thing people do is wave. So that will somewhat lead into the next slide, or that's kind of why we think it's going to expand the market to the masses, right? I hope I drove home the point there that literally anyone can use their hands. We've all been trained since birth. It's super natural. But how do we take VR to the next level? Right, especially VR. And AR, again, it's not as much about presence, but you do when you want people to feel that they're there. But especially in VR, virtual reality is the representation of possible worlds and possible selves with the aim of making them appear as real as possible, but ideally by creating a subjective sense of presence and full immersion in the user. And when you break this down at like a deeper level, if you double click, so to speak, on that, you come to two illusions that are widely known in this kind of more academic world of VR and this concept of presence. The first is the place illusion. The place illusion is experience something as if you were actually there and you can interact naturally. So you can imagine a virtual world with the person in front of you, and if you lean around them, you see stuff, and so that kind of like puts you like, okay, it's responding, I have this head tracking, it's really cool. That's the start of the place illusion, but then you want to stick your hand out. And if you don't see your hand, if it doesn't appear to you there, like it's going to break. It's not going to feel as if you're in this space, right? And that's the place illusion. Now, the plausibility illusion is that your environment reacts appropriately as you'd expect. And again, this comes back into human intuition. And again, if you're sitting there and you're looking at this person and they're standing there real stiff and you wave at them, and the NPC just stands there like they do in most video games, you don't feel like you're there. You don't feel it's real. But when you wave at someone and they wave back at you, it immediately goes, wow, okay, this is real. It's an NPC, and I'm not talking about like it's an actual real human being on the other side. Just that interaction, they're responding to you as you'd expect them to respond. That's the key. When you achieve both of these, you really give the person the sense that they're there. Right, and so we really believe that hand tracking is going to be crucial to that aspect of VR. Again, it extends to AR. You want people, again, to feel natural. You want to feel as if they're in this, like they're not taken out of their environment, which can be distracting if you're doing things like training or things like that. An interesting study came out back in 2009. And I apologize, I didn't get the link up here, but it's in my notes. Slater et al. In 2009, they did a study where they put people in VR, they walked them through, and it was like one of those things, maybe like the plank, where it's like trying to make you think that you're going to fall off, and they measured anxiety and arousal in these people. And they did it once without ray tracing, so that you were just in this thing and there was no shadows, that you were just walking across this board and, okay, great. And then they did it again with shadows, just the simple thing, so that the sun was over there and you could see your shadow on the ground over here. And they could measure a difference in the anxiety and arousal in those participants. That little bit helps our brain fully dive in, right? And that's what hand tracking is going to have an effect on people in your experiences. So, it's expanding the market. We're going to help people achieve presence. Hopefully you're in. All right, let's talk about some lessons learned. So when we go back to the shift from desktop to touchscreen, and again, even though let's go way back. Microsoft shipped Solitaire with every single Windows machine. And most people are like, what's that all about? What, cool game, whatever. But it was literally to teach people how to drag and drop. It was fundamentally everything you did on the desktop could be boiled down to like a few interactions in Solitaire. Genius. You play Solitaire and all of a sudden you felt like you could use the rest of your computer. No one even had to tell you. It was natural, right? Apple, when they put out the iPhone, they made it so you had to slide to unlock. They could have made it a button. They could have immediately popped up your passcode. No, they made you slide. They made you swipe so that you knew, like you were educated, like, okay, now I get it. I'm going to do stuff like this. Right? That's like a powerful thing. So we need to learn how to educate users. In our demos, what we do is we have people wave, give a thumbs up sign. You get the tutorial. Yeah, right? Oh, wow. How did it know that I did that, right? There's like a certain thing where you're educating the user. Now they understand, right? Skeuomorphism. So this is the idea that you design stuff to look like the real physical objects in life, right? For many people, it was on that first iPhone that there was the YouTube icon and it was literally a TV sitting there, right? The cassette one was like literally a recorder, like a microphone, right? Like the idea is you design things so people like associate them to physical things. In the practical sense of UIs, what that meant is that buttons got designed like toggles, so you actually felt like you needed to go take that thing and slide it over, just like on your stereo at home, right? You literally designed it in a way. If you remember, we were used to a hover world where you could like mouse over and it would tell you that that thing was clickable because it would go from the pointer to the hand, right? Or I don't know if I have that backwards. I think I have that right. So, those are the types of design things to make people understand, like you have to educate the user, right? And you have to think about that because we all want to make it as easy as possible on the user. And eventually it turned into like responsive web design, where developers actually thought about, they knew there'd be mobile stuff. It wasn't just you were getting some weird desktop rendered pages, maybe the hamburger icon menu would be like out of the way and you invented the little hamburger icon, so now you kick that, now you get the drop down instead of that left column that was on every website. And actually developers had to rethink this. And that's kind of where we're getting to, is like developers need to start rethinking. But the expectation from the user, even more so when we get to the metaverse, is that everything I want is going to be where I want it. Right? And that was what we started to get taught, right? The smartphone, the promise of the smartphone was that you had a computer in your pocket and you had access to like the internet, right? And then it got, boiled down to text. And what touchscreens also did was open up the screen, right? Like you got rid of the keyboard. Now you could have big pictures. You could have big, bold games that you could play instead of playing Snake, which I actually loved. But, so anyways, these are some lessons learned. Again, think about these types of things. If you're designing applications or bringing people in, you got to educate your users and really use things like skeuomorphism, not exactly a one-to-one thing, but I'll talk about how we can apply some of those. So in the concept of designing for hand tracking, the very first thing we do is try to tell people to make interactions physical. Again, this goes back to a lifetime of physical experience. If you're doing something like you have to pay someone in a game, back like in the days of Zelda where you're buying your swords and your various things, now it's not like hit a button, bring this up, pay this person. It's pull out your wallet, take the money out, and hand it to the person. Like make that interaction physical. That's what people are accustomed to. And that's going to help your users overall be able to really, you can onboard users far faster if you use those techniques. Curved UI panels. This is an interesting one as far as like, people come into the world of VR or even in AR, like you're just used to, okay, we've all designed things flat. Well, when you bring them in the world of VR, and especially, you have different field of views, different display sizes, and you throw a flat thing up and it's too far and you want to bring it in so people can interact with it. But then you get this point where it's like, it's actually like a tough reach depending on like the aspect ratio and things like that. And so one of the lessons we've learned that's had a lot of effect is being able to curve the UI panel. So then now basically you can think of it as a sphere being presented to the person. So whenever they're looking at something, they're still seeing it as they'd expect. It doesn't really change the way that like we visually perceive it. But now I can just reach up there, I can reach here, and it's not like a far reach. The last thing I'd say is using affordances. Wow, I got 8 seconds. I'm gonna have to cruise through here. The last thing I'd say is using affordances to provide feedback. Things like audio, right? Just like we had the keyboard clicks that helped us know that, yes, I hit a button there, so I could type fast, and like you had that visceral response that like, okay, I typed that. We don't have haptics in the world of hand tracking yet, right? We have our haptics and stuff, but it's not necessarily in the world of VR and AR quite yet. But also one of the things I like is that you can bring back the hover. Like if you see a panel and you have your hand over it, you can now contextually know that the person's hovering over the panel. And again, you can now present things so they understand like, okay, it's 0 to 100 on this one. I'm gonna drag my slider. So that's like another good example. And I will click through these a little bit quicker. Poses, gestures. Honestly, the very first question I get from everyone designing is like, hey, can we get some gestures? Like, oh, we want like this sign, or we want like the 3, or we want like the Spock sign, or the Vulcan. Like we gotta do that. I just say this: use them sparingly. Not only are they tough to make work for everybody, right? One person's Spock symbol might not be the same as someone else that might have arthritis. Right, there's a lot of like human things to this that like the technology doesn't have quite the same like human understanding that we do, and so we want to use them sparingly. Additionally, when you think about having a home gesture or something like that, well, when we actually get to the world where there's hundreds of different apps people use, thousands of different apps people use, look at your smartphone, how many different apps. Well, all of a sudden you're reintroducing cognitive load. Like, what was the gesture for this app? Or does this gesture conflict with the gesture for like the operating system or the launcher for the device I'm on? That's one of those things that like, again, use them sparingly. Consider user comfort. Again, back to the UI panel, if you have a bunch of stuff, everyone loves Minority Report, right? That's like the first thing. Oh, you guys do the stuff like Minority Report. It's like, yeah, use some stuff up here for maybe like 45 seconds. And then your shoulders start to get tired. And then use it for like 5 minutes. And then, pretty soon you're looking like Schwarzenegger because you got like massive shoulders because you're just getting exercise the whole time. It's tiring. It's actually tiring. So there's like a sweet spot in the interaction zone where people can very comfortably use things. You need to rethink that. It's kind of counterintuitive to some people, especially when you come from controllers. Because, controllers, you can have like a very accurate laser pointer type thing where, you have like the full thing there. So that's one of the things to think about. How to adapt existing applications. Again, this is one where you really want to take inventory of your interactions and their frequency. A lot of this comes into like menus and things, right? You don't have like 12 different drop downs where you can click and then go. It's like you have to have the key interactions like pretty surface level. So that's why I like using this example here, where we've had to rethink like, even like a paint menu of how you present these things. Because you want to have it as few as possible, that kind of to channel the Steve Jobs, every song on an iPod was supposed to be 3 clicks away, right? Like you have to rethink the actual design. And lastly, well, the interaction zone, again, that's what I'm talking about as far as like don't make people reach, like understand it. And also certain motions, again, if you take a throwing motion, like the cameras only see basically forward about 170 degrees. If you have a throwing motion like this, it becomes really tough, right? So don't make a lot of your most frequent interactions do stuff like that. And then like everything, experiment, iterate, test. Maybe not in that order since I read them backwards. But yeah, try it out. Again, we're all learning here. And we have a pretty active developer community. So by all means, like jump into that and a lot of lessons learned. And everyone loves this community because everyone's trying to build great new stuff. So really encourage that. And then I'm just going to go one last thing here. Really excited. We've spent a lot, almost 10 years now. We have our stuff, what we think is the best hand tracking in the world, running on mobile devices. I have a demo here of our stuff with our camera running on a Pico. One of our customers is Lynx. They're out of France. A guy named Stan Larocque did that. They had a successful Kickstarter where they blew it out of the water for pre-orders, and so that's coming next year. And it's going to be the first kind of realization of this, where they're going to ship that headset, mixed reality headset, with no controllers, just our hand tracking, right? And I just want to hopefully start a video here. And this is just real time, it's running. Again, I say MR because you're getting the video pass through. And you can just draw right onto the world. Use your hands, everyone can do it. Our stuff's currently running for over 3 to 4 hours. You know, we've really optimized it. We work with Qualcomm to optimize our stuff, so it's low intensity, it runs on the DSP. And you know, we're excited to work with people both in the OEM space, but also if you're designing applications. Again, we have a real good solution for the enterprise, and hopefully excited to work with you all at making this industry boom, right? We want this thing to reach the next level. I think we all do. And so hopefully we can do our part and make it happen. So in summary, the touchscreen helped smartphones fulfill the promise of a computer in our pocket. Hand tracking will make it XR accessible to everyone, and we can use lessons learned to ease the transition and really make this thing happen. So thank you very much. Sorry for going a little bit long.
Matt, thank you very much. I don't know if there is time for just one question. Matt, please. One.
I'm happy to hang around in the back afterwards. I'll let the next guy go, and Barath's a good buddy of mine. So,
Okay.
I can. No, let's at least do one. I'm just saying, like, if people are.
The one question. My name's Abe. I'm a technologist at a children's hospital, and I work with a lot of kids who have different mobility restrictions, who aren't able to use their hands. And I was just curious, what's your opinion on accessibility within the hand tracking space?
Great question. I'd say it's something that it's definitely on our mind. We want to make things work. We want to make things work for everybody, right? Like the whole promise of this is make it work for everybody. There are limitations, right? I'll say that anecdotally, the best thing I can say is that one of the flight attendants at Lufthansa actually had a finger amputated, and our model was able to track them and recognize that hand, and still it all works. But it puts the fifth finger back. And the response from this person, was incredibly positive. They thought it was like a magical experience because they got to like go out and they looked at it and it was like, wow, okay, like it was there for them. That's a positive, right? I know there's challenges, there's limitations. We look at things with like dark tattoos on their hand that can kind of throw off the stuff. So we're working on that stuff every day. We're hoping to get it. We'll constantly be improving. Again, we want to make it work for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.